Have you seen the new rig from Axial Racing? The Capra! Since we are on ever-escalating videos of specialness, the most special, extra specialness episodes ever, I figured I'd step it up just one more notch and do a somewhat review of the Axial Racing Capra that was just released. If you're not familiar with this rig, and you probably are if you're into RC cars, especially crawlers, Axial Racing just came out with a completely new rig, ground up. Nothing is the same except for maybe our ring and pinion gear from the SCX-10-2 axles. But otherwise, it is a completely new rig, and it has portals. It has portals. Axial finally made a rig with portals. And you may notice that even though this one has 1.9s on it, it's really got a wide track width to it. And most people would be a little bit concerned about that. I know I am, and I haven't driven it yet. However, there is so much rear clearance under this thing. There is so much front clearance under this thing. I don't think that our wide track width is actually going to help us out. So let's get into the rig just for a little bit. We'll talk about what it is, what it does, then we're gonna go drive it on the rocks. So you may be asking yourself, what are portals? And the easiest way to describe what a portal axle is that normally we would have this little axle tube go straight into the middle of our wheel. And on a portal axle, it has an extra gear down in the outside here that gives us extra clearance underneath our axle and our pumpkin. And what that is useful for is essentially just having more clearance. It also gives us a chance to add more gear reduction in our axles as well. And that is exactly what Axial Racing did. If I'm not mistaken, it has a 2-to-1 reduction from our axle shaft to the outside of our portal. And having the most amount of reduction in our axles is always best for torque twist and for performance of a solid axle rig. So it's very good to see that. Now, this rig kind of looks like a rock racer, kind of looks like an ultra buggy, but they seem to be billing this as a rock crawler, which, that's kind of what they make. But I kind of question what their motives were in this because unfortunately, out of the box, it only has a 30-to-1 gear ratio. Now, I have heard that even though they specify a 12-tooth pinion as the smallest that you can get, with some different screws on your motor mounts, you can actually get down to a 10-tooth pinion. What I would love to see in a rig is about a 45-to-1 gear ratio for 1.9 tires, as a possibility at least. And since they did not leave enough room for a 550 motor, this is a compounding issue in my opinion. I'm sure it'll drive fine with a good motor, but this is my opinion on the matter. What I would like to see is more gear reduction in rigs so that we don't have to use the highest quality of motor. Otherwise, I'd like to see the ability to fit a 550 motor so that we can undo some of that torque loss that you get without having enough gear reduction by adding more motor, because more motor is more torque. However, that is not the case on this rig. So we can only fit a 540 motor and as stock, and as I am testing today, we are only in a 30-to-1 gear ratio. But we're gonna see how it does. Because of the gear ratios on this rig, if you want to stay stock or close to stock, I would highly recommend either a 35-turn 540 or the equivalent in a 5-slot, which would be a 16-turn 540. Right now, I have a Crawlmaster Magnum 16-turn installed because it's my favorite brushed motor right now, but I would also recommend a Crawlmaster Pro in the 16-turn variation, or a Crawlmaster Expert in the 16-turn variation, or a Crawlmaster Sport in the 16-turn variation. And that's just about the right wheel speed running 3S LiPo in my opinion. If you manage to cram a 10-tooth pinion into the rig, you could probably go to a 13-turn Crawlmaster or the equivalent in 3-slot, which would be a 27-turn Torquemaster or Trailmaster 540. My personal preference is definitely 5-slot all the way, and with the new active drag in the BRXL firmware that I'm testing, it has plenty of drag, especially with the Magnum motor. It's one reason why I really, really love the Magnums. But I don't think there's really too much more to talk about this rig. Yeah, actually, let's talk about the battery tray. So this is, normally there'd be 2 little clips for your hood. You pop the hood up, and our battery fits in here. Unfortunately, they didn't quite leave enough room for a standard 220 milliamp hour pack that you would use in, say, an airplane. I have a ton of them. It's almost exclusively what I run. Or in the more updated model, it's a 3500 milliamp hour battery, but it's the same form factor. And it is literally just millimeters off from fitting in there. I don't think I have one in here to show you because it didn't fit. So for today's testing, I'm just using an 850 milliamp hour Nanotech. I do hear that there's some shorty racing packs that are 3S 4100 milliamp hours that will work. However, I don't have one to test today, so we're just gonna shove this little guy in here, and I'm probably gonna get 45 minutes of crawling from this anyway, so there is nothing wrong with using a teeny tiny pack as long as your motor isn't too much for it and your gear ratio isn't too much for it. But hey, we won't know until we test, right? So that is what we're going to do. And I do believe it is about time to go test. And the electronics that we decided to put in this was a BLS HV500 version 2 servo from Holmes Hobbies, a Crawlmaster Magnum 540 in the 16-turn variation, a BRXL ESC with a special tune that I'm working on right now, and then I used pretty much the cheapest radio that I could find to showcase the low speed control that a good motor and ESC will give you even if you have a very low dollar radio. And this is the old AX3 from Axial before they got bought back out by Horizon, and it is paired with whatever run-of-the-mill receiver that came with it. So about as cheap as we can get on the radio. Aha, I almost forgot one important thing, which I can't really even show you in here. But this rig has dig, and it has been a really, really long time since we had a vehicle that came in a kit form with dig. And what that does is allow you to either freewheel or completely lock up your rear tires and then use your front tires to dig around and turn really sharply, practically in one spot. I am not really a big fan of it, so I just locked it out with a zip tie into normal function so we get our four-wheel drive. But I'll probably get a micro servo at some point in time and install that and get to choose our dig functions. But since I'm not competing with it, it's really not that big of a deal. Going on trail runs is just one more thing to fail. It's a little bit more weight in there. It's a little bit more complexity dealing with the radio. And I don't even know if this radio has a third channel button to begin with. So at any rate, I don't have the dig installed right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go out on the rocks and do a little bit of testing, see how the electronics, the gearing, and the suspension works. So I'll see you outside. It's my favorite time of day. We're outside on the test rocks with the Axial Capra. Now, first thing I always like to do is show the wheel speed of a rig. Stock gearing, 16-turn Crawlmaster Magnum, 3S LiPo. For a 16-turn / 35-turn equivalent, that is super fast. But it'll work, especially with a Magnum. So now what we are going to do is get on the rocks. All right, we're out here on these test rocks. So who else has picked up a Capra? What'd you think about it so far? I mean, this is perfect torque twist territory right here, and I'm seeing none. As expected, from some good geometry, a company that knows what they're doing, and lots of gear reduction in the axles. Did you expect anything different though? I must say that the new plastics that they're using are very nice. It feels nice and hard, a little bit flexible at the same time, so maybe a high glass content nylon. And yeah, this rig is pretty wide. Let's just go with it. Let's go on the high line. What do y'all think about the width of this rig? Especially if you already own one. Center of gravity, we're gonna test her out. Having a little bit of overdrive in the front would help this situation, help that front end pull down. But look at that, not too bad. And oh boy, all the clearance in the world. Wow. So on our basic climb, she's looking quite capable. Quite capable. And I can definitely tell that the gear reduction is twitchy. is the best way to put it. But it's workable. And part of that may be the Magnum motor kind of masking the lack of gear reduction. But I tell you, it seems like this rig is just made for my rock pile. Oh yeah, this little guy usually gets us every time when I don't get that tire on top. But let's just slow motion replay that again. Just this will make a bad driver out of you. Oh, it clears right over. You don't even have to worry about it with this rig. So just the teeny amount of driving I've been doing right now, this thing is super capable. I thought the track width was really going to hurt, and it isn't. Although I do think that I would want slightly taller tires or slightly less track width. One of the two. Here's our classic high centering rock. Didn't hit the links at all. Barely got our skid plate. So there is enough low speed control with the 30-to-1 ratio. It's there. However, I do have concerns about the feel and the softness that a sealed can motor is going to have in here, since we can't jam a 550 in. But that's my concerns as a snob. Any other motor snobs out there? You know, I really have certain expectations, certain wants of how I like a motor to feel. And part of that, of course, is how it gets power to the ground. Our tires, and obviously these are sticky enough that everything's sticking to them. Let's see if I can manage through this crack. And if I had to dig, this would be a point where I could dig over and get in there without a reverse, but we're not in a competition, so it's not that big of a deal. Pretty stable geometry, I must say. It didn't unload right there. So now let's be not so nice to it. Let's get her bound down. Try to get her bound down. Oh, whoa. Well, just getting myself in trouble right here. Normally this would not be, normally it wouldn't be an issue. All right, we'll just have to drop that rear tire off. Slow and controlled. Are you a slow and controlled driver, or do you like to hammer down? I'm a little bit of both. Right now, of course, I'm just testing the geometry of this rig and kind of taking her easy, but it does have just enough wheel speed with this 16-turn motor to pop over objects if we needed to. However, I must say, with all the clearance that it has, we haven't had to use any wheel speed bumps yet. And of course I say that and I get myself wedged enough to where we're gonna have to just pop through. There. And just a teeny bit of torque twist right there. Just a teeny bit of suspension hardening. You can see we'll get it to settle, see if it pops back up. It doesn't pop back up, so it must have a good roll center. So what kind of tires are y'all choosing for your Capra? Or what are your favorite tires in general right now? I'm a fan of Voodoos, generally. The Hyrax do seem to work fairly well on the powdery limestone around here. I do find the Voodoos a little bit easier to tune, but it is certainly not impossible to tune other brands of tires. This is what we would call riprap crawling in here, where it's just loose boulders. I think a lot of people in Florida know all about the riprap crawling underneath bridges. Let me know in the comments if you're from Florida, or what state you're from in general. Maybe you got riprap in your state. I know pretty much everywhere it does, but some states have more natural rock than others. Maybe you're from Utah or Colorado or any of those kind of western desert states. They seem to have a whole lot of good rock. All right, we finally managed to drive ourselves into a bad spot. And the torque of the Magnum pushes us through. I thought I was gonna be more stuck. Let's see if we can get back over the other way. Just drag those axles over. There we go. Finally got her high centered. Totally high centered. Ring. Oh no. I might have to get myself out with the hand of God. Is it cheating? Is it cheating to use the hand of God? Oh yeah, I should have bumped through that with some speed. We'll just try again. With a little speed. What's your favorite turn of motor in a typical rock crawler? Whatever that is, you probably need to add a couple of winds for this guy. Yeah. Oh no. All right, one more time. That's a hard line. I have to go a little higher. And I do like a little bit of wheel speed just in case. Look, we made it. Would you call that a win? Now we got to get back up on the rocks. Let's see if we can make it up this. This is a really, really tough climb. Just nothing but overhangs. Oh no. You know, it's a good thing that our driver was a gymnast when he was young, because otherwise I think he'd get dizzy doing backflips. Woo! And this would have been a place that the freewheel function or the dig function would have been nice. So, yeah, you know, maybe for a fun crawler, I can see the attraction for having the dig. Yeah. Oh, that's like a mountain goat. That is a really tough section. If we can get all the way through this, we can really, oh yeah, that is a tough section. That speaks volumes as to the geometry of the rig and also the rig itself, I guess. The geometry of the rig and the clearance that it has. So as usual, I think I could just crawl out here for the rest of the day, but we have other things to do, real work to do. Boo! What kind of real work do you do in life? Mine is fixing equipment at the shop, engineering new products, and right now learning how to program software. So I guess we'll get back to the real work. I'll see you inside. So I am pleased to say that there was no surprises in how the rig handled. The suspension geometry is on point, as we should expect from any rig these days that's coming out. There's been so many advancements in the suspension geometry, and also with the addition of the portal axles, the torque twist was barely there, and the handling was really on point. One thing that I would probably like to do is to either soften my springs, add some internal springs to increase my droop just a little bit, or maybe go to 90mm long shocks. We will see. But as it sits, it's just a little too top heavy in my opinion. But otherwise, what a fun rig. Now, for a kit, this is about as good as I could ask for, honestly. And with some quality electronics, we can get around the 30-to-1 gear ratio. But if I was gonna have one complaint about the rig, well, it certainly wouldn't be the fact that they included a light bar. That was pretty sweet. It would be the 30-to-1 gear ratio would be my only complaint, the lack of gear reduction. So if I was going to heavily modify this rig, the first thing that I would probably do is just throw a regular old 3-gear tranny into it. And I do hear that vendors are working on a new skid plate so that you can adapt a normal AX10/SCX10 style transmission in there. I haven't done the ratios yet, but I would assume that we would be able to hit 45-to-1 pretty easily, maybe even a little bit more gear reduction. And in that case, it's time to volt up and gear down and get our wheel speed back in check while having our motor spin faster. And that gains us torque, that gains us drag brake, that gains us efficiency on the motor, and it gains us what I would like to think is a proper gear ratio for a rock crawler. Now, if you're gonna be a rock racer, then this rig is just fine for that. And we'll see how it holds up long term. But, you know, all in all, that's probably a pretty small complaint for the rig. All in all, I think it'll be just fine as long as we have suitable electronics for it, which means we don't want too fast of a motor. And that's why I do recommend the 16-turn Crawlmaster or the 35-turn Torque Master for a stock setup running 3S LiPo. So if you do have any other questions, comment down below, give a big ol' like, a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell, and anything else that YouTube decides that you need to do. So thanks for tuning in and have a good day. Let's see if we can get backflip with all this wheel speed. Well, that was technically a backflip.